We're very happy to have Anita Skeen, who began her teaching at Bowling Green State University, where she received an MA in English Literature and an MFA in Creative Writing in the 1970s. She later taught in the MFA program at Wichita State University in Kansas, where she received a Regents Award for Excellence in Teaching. And she joined the Michigan State University Department of English in 1990. In 1997, she began serving as the director of the Residential Option in Arts and Letters program, a living and learning program for selected freshmen and sophomores in the College of Arts and Letters. That program increased her interest in and commitment to undergraduate education and to building links between the students in that program and other units on campus, as well as with the East Lansing community. Since 25, she has taught the annual writing workshop throughout the month of September that accompanies the One Book, One Community yearly book selection. Anita has also taught in Michigan State University's Studies Abroad program in England and Ireland. For a number of summers, when she was in college and afterwards, she served as a city recreation director for low-income housing projects in Charleston, West Virginia, and as a counselor at summer camps in Pennsylvania and New York. She has taught K through 12 students while working with the Kansas Arts Commission. Uh, uh, she began working with senior citizens centers and libraries and at the at Ghost Ranch in Abiquiu, New Mexico. And she's been the director of the creative arts program at that ranch, Ghost Ranch, for 32 years and director of the Fall Writing Festival there for 16 years. Most recently, she was writer in residence at Aurora Falls Writers Retreat. She's the author of 6 volumes of poetry, uh, uh, beginning in 1986, such titles as Each Hand a Map, Portraits, Outside the Fold, Inside the Frame, that's in 1999, The Resurrection of the Animals in 2002, Never the Whole Story, 2011, When We Say Shelter, 2007, and then with Oklahoma poet Jane Taylor. And then her most recent books are The Unauthorized Audubon in 2014, which is a collection of poems about imaginary birds accompanied by linocuts of anthropologist, visual artist Laura B. DeLind. With Taylor, she co-edited the literary anthology Once Upon a Place, Writings from Ghost Ranch. Her poetry, short fiction, and essays have appeared in numerous literary publications and anthologies. And uh, in Lansing, she wrote for the alternative newspaper City Pulse. Most recently, she's committed contributed a chapter entitled "Pomegranates, Hammocks, and Red Wheelbarrows: Just What Does Depend on Poetry." To create, and she did that for the creative for the oh, pardon me. I'm going to read that title again. Uh, let's see. Yeah, pomegranates, hammocks, and red wheelbarrows. Just what does depend on poetry to the creative writing in the community, to creative writing in the community. Take It Outside appeared in 2013, and the Michigan State University Museum has exhibited prints and poems from the unauthorized Audubon, and they've given very extensive exhibitions more than once. And it has also been displayed in other places. Please welcome Anita Skeen.
Thanks. Thanks, Ed. Gosh, I think I have been busy. So anyway, I'm delighted uh, to be here with you all tonight and to be part of your series. And I think you do wonderful work. And the fact that you bring a different poet to so many people once a month is just really special, particularly in these times. And when I thought about what I wanted to read tonight, and as I was looking through poems, I thought about how much of my writing has been influenced by other people and other writers, not just writers, but other people. The number of poems that I've written that are based on a sentence someone said to me, or the number of poems that have an epigraph from someone's book. But it seems like there's always someone out there who's mentoring my poems in some way. And that's not always obvious, but I think, I guess I want to pay tribute tonight to all the writers who have gone before us and who are with us now, and whose work we still sometimes consciously and unconsciously incorporate into what we're doing. And I wanted to start, many of you will not be surprised if I tell you I want to start by reading a poem by Irene McKinney, the former West Virginia Poet Laureate. And there are some West Virginians here tonight. Irene passed away in 2012. She had been appointed Poet Laureate of West Virginia in 1984, I believe, and she served in that position until she died. She has well, see, her last book before she died is called Unthinkable. And it's a wonderful book. You can see from all the pages that I've turned down. If you don't know Irene McKinney's work, I would say go read. This is one of the books that will change your life. After she died, Maggie Anderson, an Ohio poet some of you might know, put together a posthumous collection of hers called Have You Had Enough, Have You Had Enough Darkness Yet? And Irene suffered from a bone cancer for the last years of her life, and she lived much longer than she had been told she would. And it was her indomitable spirit that allowed that to happen. And the final poem in Unthinkable is called Ready. And and I wrote a poem in response to it. I'm going to read Irene's poem first, and then I'm going to read mine. But I wanted to read it because I think in these times, we need our indomitable spirits, and we need to be ready. And there are many different ways that we can be ready. And as Irene was facing the end, she was still ready. So this is her poem, Ready. I remember a Sunday with the smell of food drifting out the door of the cavernous kitchen, and my serious teenage sister and her girlfriends, Jean and Mary Bell, standing on the bank above the dirt road in their white sandals, ready to walk to the country church a mile away, and ready to return to the fried chicken, green beans, and ham, and fresh bread spread on the table. The sun was bright, and their clean cotton dresses swirled as they turned. I was a witness to it, and I assure you that it's true. I remember this 30 years later as I got up from the hospital bed, favoring my right side where something else had been removed. Pushing a cart that held practically all of my vital fluids, I made my way down the hall because I wanted to stand up for no reason. I had no future plans, and I would never found a movement nor understand the simplest equation. I would never chair the Department of Importance. Nevertheless, I was about to embark on a third life, having used up the first two, as I would this one. So I shoved the IV with its sugars and tubes steadily ahead of me, passing a frail man in a hospital gown, pushing his cart from the other direction. Because I was determined to pull this together, hooking this lifeline into the next one. And I did a workshop for Friends of Theodore Retke last, I guess it was fall, and I think it was called Writing Toward Joy. And I used that poem and talked about how even in the dark times, so many poems include the dark and the hopeful. And I find that poem, though it's dark, a hopeful poem. And I wanted to respond to that. And so I wrote a poem called Ready. And I wrote it as a letter poem because a letter poem is a form I really love. I think it allows you to be poetic and prosaic at the same time. And it allows you to maybe tell secrets and to make assumptions and some other things. But anyway, my poem is called Ready, with thanks to Irene McKinney for her poem, Ready. Dear Irene, I too will soon be moving to that third life, having, like you, used up at least 2 others, or maybe more accurately, like a cat, having used up my first 8. I could have been dead, my mother said, of pneumonia as a child, or the fatality in a car wreck on a river road on a pleasant afternoon, landing in water rather than on the railroad tracks. No train coming, thank the Lord. I could have died falling from a water tower on a dark, starless night, one I climbed with a boy I wanted to love after his fraternity formal, or been shot by police on the Boston Common during anti-war protests. You would appreciate all of these, I know, especially the last. I am not finished with protests, nor were you, pushing a cart with your vital fluids down the hospital corridor, because you could. I will write letters because I can. I will make phone calls because I can. I will go out on a cold day in the snow carrying a sign that tells the wicked just where they can go. In that next life, the one that will come, perhaps after a blinding flash, or one that I might trickle into, let it be word by word, please. I hope to meet you there, chairing the Department of Importance, after mightily protesting your election. You will invite me for tea, as you did in your last life, then hand me a book, many blank pages of fine paper, weightless to the touch, its cover carved with masks. Right, you will say, start at the beginning, and I will. I'm going to read 4 or 5 poems that are influenced immediately by other writers. And many of you know I've been serving on the board of the Friends of Theodore Recky up in Saginaw, Michigan since 2020. And I love that work. Rulaine Stokes, who's here, has been involved with Friends of Theodore Recky, and some other people have read for Recky, Janine Hathaway and Carol Davis, and it's just great to see all these connections. I love that our worlds are connected through words and through poetry. But we had an event several years ago up there where 7 Michigan poets took a title and a first line of a Recky poem, and then wrote our own poem on the same one. And I think we each, I don't know how many poems we did, but we scheduled this event in the backyard of Retke's house where there were picnic tables, and we scheduled it in April because we thought it would be lovely weather. This is Michigan, remember? We thought it would be lovely weather. And we had this event where 7 of us read a couple of poems we had written. Someone read the Recky poem, and then we read our poem, and someone else read a Recky poem, and we read our poem. And it was freezing. And we were all sitting there at the picnic tables, huddled up in our clothes. And I wrote 5 poems, and I tried to pick some that were well known of his, and I tried to pick some that were not so well known. And one of the ones I chose was The Geranium. Some of you may know that poem. I'm not going to read his poem, but you can go look it up in his collected poems. So I'm going to read The Geranium after Theodore Recky. When I put her, and this is his first line, when I put her out once by the garbage pail, her salmon bloom fallen from stalk to pot, I took several steps back, studied her spindly limbs, then stepped forward again to see if any life were left. A few nubbins of green, a hint of growth. The old terracotta pot beside the plastic pail twanged a heartstring. I couldn't leave her to be abused by rough hands, tossed into the voracious trash truck, uprooted and broken. In our house, she looked ragged, an incongruous part of the roomscape. Here, in the spring air, among trees coaxing out their blossoms, birds bringing back song, grass mowed for the first time this season. I recalled those Decoration Day trips to the cemetery with my family. Daddy push mowed the fresh grass on the small plot where my grandfather and grandmother lay in eternal rest. A whiff of grass today brings it all back, tenderness and death. My mother brought geraniums. They were hardy, she said, would survive drought and storm. She lies there now. My father lives 5 states away. I tend the graves alone these days. Geraniums, my choice too. Peach, a shade my mother loved. I bring petunias, lavender and royal purple for my grandmother. No roses. This morning, I stand, watch our geranium as though it might revive before my eyes. A time-lapse resurrection on the driveway. It does not. It stays itself, despite my memory. I lift the pot carefully with both hands, take it back inside the house. Saved in spite of itself. Less darkness, more light. Don't we all want that? I think you all know probably Redkey's most famous poem, The Waking. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Now I've forgotten the second line. In what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. I find my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. And I chose that poem because I liked the villanelle, and also because this was not one of the Redkey poems that uses the same title and first line, but this one is clearly influenced by Redkey. And I visited Redkey's grave with Thomas Lynch, a Michigan poet and writer that some of you all may know. He's also a mortician. And we were up in Saginaw for a Redkey celebration on Redkey's birthday, and several of us went to the cemetery. And I stood there with Tom and talked about my mother, and we talked about Redkey, and she had just recently died. And being there with Tom and being at Redkey's grave and thinking about the waking resulted in this poem called The Sleeping. So remember, it's a villanelle, and you can hear the rhyme. My mother journeys now to states unknown, where letters can't be sent, nor love delivered. Where do they go who sleep beneath a stone of granite, names and dates their own? I touch the polished surface, shiver, think of my mother, off in states unknown, who never felt the life of skin and bone was more than brief. She knew threads would sever. Where do they go who sleep beneath a stone set at their graves by those who want a phone line looped and strung across the Jordan River? My mother cannot call from states unknown. I walk through headstones, clustered and alone, constellations, moons where I'm the drifter. Where do they go who sleep beneath these stones? At Redkey's grave in Saginaw, a poem, a bloom of words, asks me to consider. Can mother journey back from states unknown? And do we sleep who sleep beneath a stone? So thanks, Ted, for that one. And another poet, I'm going to read two more that I think are indebted to poets that I love. And one is James Wright. And being a West Virginian, of course, I love James Wright and his Ohio poems. And Autumn Begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio, and others with long titles. And this is a poem. I have always loved his poem, A Blessing, where he goes out and stands in the field with the Indian ponies that most of you probably know. And this is a very different poem from that, but it's called A Declaration after James Wright. And I suppose it begins the same way and it ends the same way, but the content is quite different. And I wrote this not long after Donald Trump was elected. And I suppose one might call it a poem of witness in some ways, a declaration after James Wright. Just off the highway to Saginaw, Michigan, afternoon sunlight explodes in the cottonwoods, and the sunset maples glow like their namesake. Some yards are clear of the autumn's notes mailed to us in blustery postage. Others lie green beneath quilted remnants of summer. A man crosses the road, opens his mailbox shaped like a 1940s Ford pickup, pulls out paper, does not look as he turns to cross back to home. Farther on, a man heaves logs into a truck bed, and another man takes trash to the road where Trump shouts from a huge blue square. Such signs, prolific as weeds in this county, pop up in yard after yard, a crescendo of hate, a cacophony of lies, a symphony of discord. Before these signs appeared, fall swept in as it does every year, apples turning red, pumpkins blooming bright, squirrels burying suntanned acorns and black walnuts in potted plants and backyard grills. Thanksgiving, we thought, would come on November 5th. Now I drive by a sign proclaiming Jesus, Trump, the second coming. A mote in the eye, an irritation which, if untreated, will cause blindness. I drive fast through this riptide of repetition. If I stepped out of my car, I would drown in the deluge. And this is the last one I'm going to read. And some of you who are Michigan poets and hopefully beyond Michigan know Cindy Hunter Morgan, who's a wonderful poet. And her latest book is called The Far Company. And it's another good one to put on your list. And she and I do a lot of collaboration and we work together, and she's involved with the Recchi Foundation. And I owe her the last two lines of this poem are really in response to a poem of hers called Antique Sound. Masquerade, with thanks to Cindy Hunter Morgan. An alien, two witches, and an astronaut approached the front door. Though this sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, it's October 31st, the evening of haunting and handouts, the night we allow ourselves to become our worst nightmare, our most fanciful dream, or the imaginations of our mothers let loose at the sewing machines. Once I was a Dutch boy, perhaps because my mother loved tulips more than I loved Hans Brinker. Another time I regressed to a Confederate soldier because of a souvenir cap I bought in Virginia on a school trip. I was most me as Zorro, arrayed in black, swishing a cape my mother lined with red silk. Masked and with a sword, dark as a big lie, I was capable of anything, visible and invisible at the same time. On this treasured night of the year, I could be anyone, few questions asked. I was like Cinderella at the ball, an imposter until midnight, joyful in my true and misunderstood self. What is that sound in the night wind? Can you hear me singing? And I'm going to sort of end this little section with the most recent poem I've written, and I've never read it before. And Jane Taylor has seen it and helped me, so thank you, Jane. But the two of us decided. He sent me a list of all the words that had been banned by the Trump administration, and said, "Why don't we write a poem using as many of these banned words as we can?" And so, you know, if you look at those words, it's practically every word under the sun. And how on earth are you going to get those into a poem? And so Jane did her poem and I did my poem. And I thought about it for a long, long time. And I came up with, as a model, Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. And so I thought I can write a poem called 13 Ways of Looking at a Banned Word. And sometimes these poems are a little riddle-like because the word does not necessarily appear. Sometimes it does appear, but you can probably, if you had this poem in front of you, I should probably have given this to Ed to put up so you could see it. But that's the way I figured out to deal with all these words. So here we go, 13 sections, 13 ways of looking at a blackbird. I mean, at a banned word. 1, what is the gender of blue? Are you indigo? Are you robin's egg? See the raven fly into the night sky? 2, she told him they were one of them. He said his dress was red. Wear your pronoun, she told them, like Clark Kent's cape. 3, black or white? Black and white. White as a ghost, a man in a sheet. Anthracite, hard and lustrous, clean burning. Whose burning? Whose identity? 4, Little Women, the woman warrior, Lakota woman, the women's room, Scarlet woman, woman of courage, the woman in white, the French lieutenant's woman, a vindication of the rights of woman. Take them back. 5, trauma, the kaleidoscope, symmetrical patterns. He did it. He did it again. Then he did it one more time. Smoke and mirrors, words, small objects constantly moving, changing, a new pattern. Not new, broken. 6, purple cornflower in Oklahoma, Indian blanket. In West Virginia, chokecherry, cardinal flower. Native Americans, Anishinaabe in Michigan, Blackfeet in Montana, Joy Harjo in the Library of Congress, Deb Holland in the interior. Native plants, species existing naturally in the ecosystem. 7, on the map, see the Gulf of Mexico? Called by the Aztecs Chalchiutlichicat, home of the Aztec deity of the sea. The sea, always a part of the larger world. Blue water, blue sky, seamless at the horizon. Names are sacred. Honor the story they tell. 8, the Greeks named the gods of the wind Anemoi, respected for their power. Boreas brought the cold winds of frosty winter, Zephyrus the warm breezes of pastel spring. What is the wind but the breath of gods? If we have breath, we have life. 9, Kermit croaks, it's not easy being green. So says the earth, shoving up roots and tubers to show their stuff. Reckless beauty. Time held me green and dying, wrote Dylan Thomas, knowing we are mortal. Though for Cummings, it's just spring and the world is puddle wonderful. Splash of water, splash of green, mud luscious. 10, it's bad, we're told, but it's good, they say. Do you want it or not? You can pay for it in more ways than one, whether you're male or female or trans, colon. Latin, across, beyond, on the other side of, through. We're through with pink, blue, beyond bully. On the other side of darkness, look, light. 11, now that we are elderly, we are not. We are elders, shaman, silver coyotes of the tribe. In Lansing, Michigan, elderly instruments markets music to the world. Elderly, we are our own instruments. We are harmony, we are solo, we are brass, we are drum. Pluck our strings, see what happens. 12, coming to the end. It's queer that the President of the United States of America is a draft dodger, not an artful dodger. It's queer that no one from his school remembers him. Queer that he persecutes immigrants when his family came from Germany. Oh, but they were white. So queer that the man with orange hair, small hands, and a smaller mind does not know how queer he appears. 13, blackbird high in the black walnut tree. More blackbirds, 1, 2, 3. Fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. Oh, there will be trouble. Blackbird, what's the message you bring? Song cracks the darkness. Sing. Thanks for surviving through all that. Anyway, so that's kind of that section of influences by other poets. And there are so many more that I could talk about. Margaret Atwood, Liesl Mueller, Carolyn Forche, Maxine Kumin, some of the writers sitting here. It's incredible the way we rely on other voices to develop our own. I try to teach that to students, and they refuse to read other writers because they don't want to be influenced. Anyway, so as I was going back through all these poems, I thought, and I found a lot of kind of family summer poems. And summer is a time, I think, for get-togethers and relatives and all that. And I decided I would read 4 or 5 poems that have to do with my own childhood and my own past and my own family. And the first one, I've also gotten interested in elegies later, or lately. Maybe Redke's Elegy for Jane, My Student Thrown by a Horse, is one of my very favorite elegies. There's so many good ones out there. They're so hard to write, and when they're done well, they're wonderful. And this is called Elegy on a Summer Night. Tonight, cooking ears of sweet corn, I remember my grandmother at family gatherings, sharp knife in hand, shaving her corn from the cob in neat planks, leaving it planed like a 2x4 because she had false teeth. All the cousins looked on in awe as she mixed the yellow slabs with her half-runner beans and devoured the lot. Do that like mine. Do mine like that, we cried, elbowing close to her plate. Me first. Tonight on the phone, my mother, a continent away, tells me my uncle, 3 states north of her, is hospitalized in a coma. I will not remember him like this, but in the dewy light of West Virginia summer mornings, how he arrives with buckets of chubby peaches and bushel baskets of beans, a carload of melons in his wild Hawaiian shirt. He drops down the tailgate. Cousins spill from the red wagon. It's his heart again, she says. It's been going for years. He's not the first to go. My uncle in Phoenix with bad lungs, and years before, my grandmother, cancer flowering in her brain. It's July once again. I'm alone in a cabin on a lake. Families camp in a park nearby. I smell dinners cooking, wood smoke and burgers, charcoal and chicken. I think of those ritual summer picnics, relatives plentiful as that fresh corn, the cousins outside for hours orbiting in the dark till ground control called us in, lightning bugs blinking the path home. Tonight, some of these cousins take planes, drive cars to the North Carolina coast, come into their father for the last time. I am nearly the age of my grandmother when she stood in the small kitchen wearing house dress and apron, sawing at the corn, surprising us with the ordinary, like she did all her life. Tonight, as I watch the ducks taxi in toward their soft island nests and darkness sponge light from the firs, I think of cousins scattered random as these stars. California, Colorado, Michigan, Oklahoma, Texas, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Alaska. Each of us losing from the constellation of memory one more fixed body as my uncle's light fades. Each of us burning a little less bright. And this is one called My Grandmother's Last Letter. And this is really thanks to Hart Crane, if you know his poem, My Grandmother's Love Letters, and which is such a wonderful poem. But My Grandmother's Last Letter, after Hart Crane. My grandmother's last letter came to me from my cousin, who found it among her mother's papers when her mother passed on. Untouched and unread, I imagine for years, the loss still profound. 62 years ago, my grandmother wrote this letter, days before her death, asking patience for her jerky handwriting, hoping the blizzard doesn't reach us so my aunt can come. She comments, the curves are bad in icy weather. Of course, Herb knows that better than I. The blizzard came. My aunt did not. Uncle Herb refused to take his car on the road. He wouldn't bring my aunt to see her mother, though they all knew she was dying. I did not. I was 13, unaware how death arrives in ways other than Western shootouts, car crashes, poisoned drinks. How death could stand beside her bed, watching her move her pen. I unfold the one-page letter, read about pain pills, how nervous they make her, how we made snow ice cream that night. She is feeling pretty good. The pink paper's aged, the envelopes foxed, bearing a 4-cent stamp, profile of Abe Lincoln, canceled at the post office in Charleston. Yet it's traveled here, to me, through how many hands, how many moves, drawers, and boxes. Who has unfolded it, read it, perhaps, found nothing unusual, nothing worth saving. But it was saved. My grandmother's words, an ordinary day. And I'm going to read one more that's got my grandmother in it. A lot of these poems are kind of heavy, and this one's, I've got a few light ones in here that I want to be sure to get in. So this one's called Supper Table. And again, it has an epigraph from Tom Hennon. You are comfortable in this spot, so full of grace and being that it sparkles like jewels spilled on water. And this was another one that Jane Taylor and I, we decided we were both going to write a poem about grace, something about grace. Now, my aunt was named Grace, so that would have been the easy off ramp, but I didn't use that. But anyway, this is called Supper Table. Every evening at supper, one of the four of us offered grace. In our kitchen on the white formica table, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, canned corn, and jello held their collective steam until they heard amen. Then the clattering of silverware, the passing of bowls, conversation of school and office, what happened at the plant. My grandmother at the end of the table said few words. Her contributions spoke simply from the table. This was the one time in that day we were all together, the hour between daytime work and winding down into night, the evening meal. Once during dessert, my grandmother's strawberry shortcake stacked on our plates, she pointed the ready whip at her creation when her finger slipped. The nozzle aimed across the table, spritzing my father in clouds of foam. He sputtered. She gasped. My mother dashed for the dish towel, and I laughed. The dog ran out from under the table. More than half a century later, I remember how that story became legend, how we all told it a little differently, how after the chaos of the moment, we settled back into that sacred space called supper, always with dessert, something sweet or nutty, home-baked or store-bought, something as ordinary and unexpected as the blessing that ushered us to this meal. Oh, golly. So how are we doing here? Okay. I'm going to read this one, a more recent one. I started thinking about words like when and how and never. And, I can't call them all adverbs or conjunctions or whatever, but how important they can be in language and in writing. And we just sort of skim over them and look for the glitzy nouns and verbs and all that. And so I have started writing some poems using those words as the title. And this is one called When. And the title is first word. When it happens, you are never prepared. The red Camaro rockets through the stop sign. The hand slips under the table to fondle your leg. The letter from the student arrives saying she has fallen in love with you. Your sister-in-law calls to announce that you need to come now. Your mother has little time left. On the plane, you imagine how it will be when you walk in the door, how she will smile and say your name. You arrive. She says nothing. You have 6 days before she is gone to prepare for your father, sitting with his face in his hands for days. Years later, when he tries to vanish, for days, for your brother, disappearing into denial. Years later, when he tries to vanish from his pain, when you show up at the hospital to talk him back into life, you remember the first dream when your mother visited after her death, where she told you, take care of your brother. She turned off the light, then left. What did she mean? You walk into your brother's room, still dark. You turn on the light. And here's another one sort of from that vein. And the title is Say When. Say when, chirped the waitress at Olive Garden, leaning over the salad bowl, shredder of Parmesan cheese, ready to crank, ready to snowcap the lettuce-scape. Say when, called out my grandmother, pouring breakfast milk from the bottle into my glass. Say when, smiled the teller, ready to lay the crisp bills in my palm. Now, we say, for the banning of automatic weapons. Now, we say, for an ethics code for the Supreme Court. Now, we say, restore women's rights to their own bodies. Say, when would you like to hear that story of why your father went off to war? Say, when would you like to learn how your mother kept her faith? Say, when will you tell me what really happened the night you took those pills? What happened before that night? What happened before the before? Say when it all started. Say when. I'm going to read about 3 or 4 more, and then we'll stop and have some time for conversation. Some of you know Marsha Aldrich, and some of you know how elegant she can be.
Anita?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
In your last book, The Least of These, which was
Yeah.
written during the COVID period, you you, you wrote a series of poems in an invented form, a 10-line poem. And could you tell us about that and perhaps read a couple examples?
Okay. Do you want me to do that now? Or you want me to do this when I finish with
Well,
these 3 or 4?
finish what you're doing, and
Okay.
then yeah.
Yeah, I will. I'll talk about those because that was a whole interesting exercise. But I'll just read maybe 3 or 4 more of these, and then I'll talk about that. But this one I wanted to read because, and I love long titles, which some of you all know. And I have to tell you that Whitcomb L. Judson is the guy who invented the zipper, and he called his zipper a clasp locker. Clasp locker. And it was debuted at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, and it was not successful. So the title of this poem is Recalling Whitcomb J. Judson and His Clasp Locker, which debuted in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair with little success. I watched my friend Max, stylish in tunic, silk scarf, high leather boots, pull her quilted down coat from the back of a chair as we stood to leave a meeting. She opens it like a sleeping bag and steps in. She takes in my baffled look, says, "It's the zipper. I can never open the zipper." So I leave it closed. She descends into the puffed fabric, a kid into pajamas, a mechanic into overalls, a sailor putting on his submarine. I know what she means. I know how teeth grab on the placket and refuse to let go, how pulling up makes the zipper grip the cloth more tenaciously. Pulling down helps nothing. There I am, stuck in my jacket like a potato in its skin. I know I should hang on, then jerk, still stripping off a Band-Aid, like stripping off a Band-Aid or tearing a scratched page from a tablet, but I go slowly, tug gently, back up and reverse. I press the fabric apart, the nylon flat, try to coax teeth back onto the track. It's push-pull, shove retreat, zip, zip. Finally, Metal leaps free from the quicksand and speeds north. I squeal, happy for one small victory over the wonder that beat out the button. Okay, we're coming. Oh, okay. I'm going to read, I think I'll read two more, and then I'll address Ed's question. And this one I owe to Naomi Nye, whom some of you also know. And I read this statement by hers, and I couldn't stop laughing. And so I had to do something with it. And she wrote, when someone recognizes you in a grocery store, nod briefly and become a cabbage. So the poem is called Transmogrification in Kroger. These chance encounters, these ill-fated being in the same place at the same time events, these heart-banging moments. By the deli, my student who received a D in his freshman composition class years ago. Near the broccoli, the neighbor who cannot stop complaining about incorrigible kids down the street. Beside the bottled water, even my brother, fixated on car engines, the incompetence of mechanics, of politicians, of doctors, of everyone but him. Oh, to be a cabbage with no ears, or an asparagus with my spear for protection, or an artichoke where my heart hides under prickly scales, impervious to the ills of the world. Better yet, a rutabaga, unrecognizable and unknown to most shoppers, cousin to the turnip, cousin to the cabbage, incapable of conversation. Okay, and let me read you one more and then stop. Oh, I take that back. I'm going to read two. And Rulane's here. I don't even know if Rulaine knows that I used a statement of hers that she wrote to me in an email. I may have sent her this or not, but she wrote in an email, do you lie awake wishing you knew how to write sonnets? And I have to say I don't, but here's the poem. Sonnet for Insomniacs. The nights are long and sleep is hard to find. There's no sense getting up and counting sheep. Due dates and facts are spinning in my mind. And yes, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. When Petrarch spun his octave and sestet, he said ideas in 6 and 8. Did he, I wonder, ever have regret about the turn, or if it sealed his fate as sonnet maker extraordinaire? Then Spenser came with quatrains, and 2 more, the couplet, clever outgrowth of his fairy queen. Shakespeare made it easier to score, with only pairs of rhyming words to plot rather than groups of 4 in his design. It's 2 a.m. I have too many lines. No sonnet yet. Is it to be or not? Okay. And I want to thank you, Rulaine, who is the current Lansing Poet Laureate and is up to wonderful things. So I'm so glad you're here tonight. So I'm going to end with this because it's about writing. And it's called Marking Time. And it also, since I opened with Irene and getting ready, I think this is an appropriate one to close with. Marking Time. Today I'm waiting, a skill practiced for years, never mastered. I watch from outside my body, a heron flying above a pond, my shadow below. I am here, I am there. I waited for small things, the aqua sweater for Christmas, the birthstone ring, a sapphire, the letter from a cousin I thought I loved, the letter from a girl I knew I loved. And important things, my grandmother's cancer to be cured, a college scholarship, a beloved cat to return from the woods, a move home to the hills, a woman to become president. Auden, in a famous poem, wrote of the elderly awaiting the miraculous birth. I am not, though I am elderly, odd word to apply to myself. I do await the miraculous, the out of the blue. I have fewer things now to wait for, less time. Bones will break, friends will pass. I've lost one parent, the other will be departing soon. I have been in love, I have loved more than once. I have waited for the poem to come, pulled it from deep in a pocket, from a cupboard, locked. I keep that key on a ring with door keys I use every day. I'm waiting for what comes next. So thanks to all of you for coming. And that was fun. I had a good time. So Ed asked about even the least of these, which is a wonderful book, primarily because of Laura DeLind's linocuts. And some of you know that before Laura and I did this book together, we did the book that Ed mentioned, the unaudible, the yeah, the
Un,
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 the what
unauthoritative.
unauthorized, the
Yeah.
unauthorized Audubon, which was all about imaginary birds. And the good part about that was Laura did the birds, and then she gave them to me in sometimes very funny ways on the windshield of my car, under my office door, or whatever. And I got to write the poem about that bird, and I got to name that bird, and I got to know what it did. And this book came about a little differently because, and as Ed said in the introduction to this book, I talk about this was done during COVID. And on the morning that our governor announced that Michigan was shutting down, I thought, this is my chance to pay attention to the things I don't normally pay attention to. And I think all poets try to do that. We try to pay attention to the ordinary and to see the ordinary in extraordinary ways, or the extraordinary in ordinary ways. And so I thought every day, I mean, I just arbitrarily decided this. Every day I'm going to write a poem of 10 lines. And it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be a poem of 10 lines. And so I started doing it. And I was writing about the birds, and I was writing about the cats. And this was in March, and then summer came. And for a while, I really was doing one every day for about 2 weeks. And then I sort of tapered off a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 a week, and then 2 or 3 a week. And then a couple of weeks, and I didn't do anything. And then I'd come back and I'd do it again and all that. But I started sending some of the poems that I thought Laura would like, ones about birds and other critters, to her. And here she was stuck in her house with nothing to do really but make linocuts. And so she started taking those poems and doing linocuts to go with them. And I'll show you a couple, and I'll just read a couple of them briefly. They're short. And so I came up with a 10-line poem, and it was just, it was totally arbitrary. I mean, I thought about the 14-line sonnet. I thought about the triolet, which has 7 lines. I thought about the haiku, which has got 3 lines. And I just wanted to do something different. So I thought, okay, 10 lines. And I found out later, when I started looking for other 10-line poems, the first time I went to teach a workshop on the 10-line poem, because I didn't want to use just my poems, I couldn't find very many 10-line poems. They seemed to be 12-line poems or 11-line poems or 9-line poems. There are a lot of 9-line poems out there, 3, 3, 3. But I couldn't find a lot of 10-line poems, and I was really surprised. So the 10-line poem really allowed to focus, allowed me to focus on something, because I only had 10 lines to do it in. And I had to start somewhere, do something, and get somewhere. And the introduction in this book, if you get it, really talks a little bit more about that. And Laura talks about how the 10-line poems saved her when she was writing the linocuts. But I'll show you, I'll pick one that's got a really good illustration here. How about, oh, this one doesn't have an illustration. Too bad. Let's see, hang on. Okay, here's one. I think you can probably see the linocut if you look. And this is the second poem in the book, and it's called My Body When I Was a Girl. My body when I was a girl was a tree, hardwood rings rolling out toward the years, branches full of nests singing. I was the spring in the woods, box turtles buried in cool mud, alert to snap down on curious toes. I was the late evening light turning dark, softening our faces to voices, ghosting us, bodies dissolved, only words. And let me find one that's a little bit, oh, okay, I'll just read this one. This is kind of a humorous one. See the woodpecker? He's great. So this is called Making a Joyful Noise. I also wrote this about Easter. Sitting atop the telephone pole, like some hood ornament from the 1950s, the pileated woodpecker drums away at what? Carpenter ants, termites, beetles, some delicacy hard for us to savor? Or does he hammer hard because the pole is there, and so is he, and he's high in the world, eagle-perched, eyeing the humdrum ones below, mowing yards, hanging laundry, not having his good time. And I did write one called the 10-line poem. Wait a minute, and I'll just close this one with that one because this is kind of funny. Oh, it's called A Little Essay on Form. And it doesn't have, there are 50 poems in this book and 25 linocuts. Because Laura didn't have, nope, that's not it. This tells you how to write a 10-line poem. Let me find it. Oh, 10 lines. And when I was putting the book together, the editor said, why did you put this poem on how to write the 10-line poem at the end of the book? And why didn't you put it at the beginning? And I said, because I didn't want people to see that I didn't follow the rules. I wanted them to read the 10 lines. But here's how I said to do it. And I do believe that this is sort of how it works. So you got 10 lines. In the first one, set the scene. Line 2, elaborate. Now, begin to pose the question, or in 4, give a slight hint where you might be off to. Pull the readers in with something known to them. Not much time left, don't panic. Line 8 begins the denouement, while 9 slips in the turn that opens out the poem, an unlatched door. So it's a delightful book, and Laura's linocuts are just stunning. She's so talented. Here's just one of some birds with one of them hanging upside down, little tick there. Oh, here's I'll just show you this one, then I'll quit. This is a poem about a fashion update, and it's a bird in leggings. So, anyway, but I do believe, and the 10-line poem seems to have become very popular, and I think that's because it does make you focus, and you have a lot of, I mean, it sounds like it's hard, but in some of the workshops it sounds like it's hard to get it all in 10 lines, but in some of the workshops I've taught, there have been incredible poems that have come out of only 10 lines because you cannot go on and on and on. You cannot digress. You have to get to it and get through it and have some kind of opening, some kind of closing that's an opening that opens out, I think.